Hello everyone, today I'm going to be reviewing Duskfade, which is an adventure platformer game that follows a boy named Zirian as he tries to save his sister from a giant mysterious clock tower that has arisen in his hometown. This game is being developed by Weird Beluga, who I had not heard of until playing this game, but the publisher behind this game is Fireshine Games, who have been on a bit of a roll with projects under them like Far Far West earlier this year and Dench Attack last month. I didn't really have many expectations going into this one. I've definitely seen this game around places like Steam Next Fest, but I never got around to trying it. So before we get into the review, I do have to disclose that I was given a key for this game for review purposes, and while I do not believe that receiving this key will affect my final decisions on the game, I do like to let you all know so you all have the information you need to make your own decisions. Now that's out of the way, let's get into the review. So today I'm going to start off with the story of Duskfade because it is both one of the most surprising things about the game and where my main criticisms with the game lie. Duskfade starts off as a pretty straightforward adventure platformer game. Set against the backdrop of a ruined civilization of clockmakers, Zirian is one of a few humans left alive in the world and must travel throughout the land along with a mysterious clockwork bird left to him by his sister. And the aim of the game is to destroy anchors holding the door closed to the clock tower, which if not dealt with, may doom the rest of the world. For the first little while, I was kind of afraid that this was all the game had going on story-wise. Just a nothing special cookie-cutter adventure, especially with the main character Zirian, who is just kind of painfully bland and kind of annoying, at least for like the first hour or so. His sidekick, Clockwork Bird Cuckoo, luckily is a bit better, and over time they develop a pretty good rapport with each other. But the thing that kind of changed my mind over time was the themes that the story tackled. Zirian and his sister, Alira, who was trapped in the clock tower, before the story began, had both recently lost their grandfather who raised them and was their only family left. And the catalyst for the story beginning is Alira locking herself in her room for weeks trying to make some contraption that ended up causing the clock tower to form. Over the course of the game, Zirian starts to encounter bosses that take the names of things like anger, sadness, and despair, and upon beating them, will give us flashback cutscenes of Zirian and Alira dealing with the subsequent emotions that they faced when their grandpa started getting sick and dying. And so what starts as a straightforward, I need to save my sister's story, begins to turn into a story about dealing with grief and the emotions that come along with the death of a loved one, which turns out to be surprisingly effective for the most part. There is one story beat that I won't spoil that I wish the game didn't do because I think it does take away from some of the weight of the story a bit, but this was much more depth than I was expecting in the story, and I'm very happy that it's here. And the same can be said for the background story of the game and the world building, where a lot of the areas in Duskfade you travel to are long lost ruins of a culture of clockmakers, which over time you get the background of who these people are by like memory fragments, and you get to piece together how it kind of all came to an end. And while not overly graphic in its descriptions, the game doesn't shy away from the fact that they're pretty much an entire civilization went extinct, and there were innocent people and children that among them had paid the price of what transpired. And look, I don't think the story is able to hit all of these notes with precision. There are a few cliche story beats that I could see coming a mile away, and some of the spoken dialogue in the cutscenes weren't overly great. I do think the voice acting isn't spectacular. Some of it's good, but not all of it. But I absolutely appreciate that this game tried to do something a little bit different with its story. It helps the game set an identity more than just being a stock standard adventure platformer, which does feel like a good segue to talk about the gameplay. So Duskfade in its essence is a pretty stock standard linear adventure platformer. There's a place to go and platforms to jump on to get there, and also things to collect on the way. Typical adventure game format, Zirian is equipped with a double jump and a dodge roll that works double as a gap closer over ledges and a combat dodge, as well as a few gadgets that he unlocks here and there that give access to different areas throughout the game, which does mean that the game does the typical adventure game thing where you see an area that you can't get to now, so you'll have to come back later when you have the gadget unlocked to get through to that place. I will say though, all of these areas are optional. My advice is, even though there are hub areas and quick teleports to get around the game, if you're wanting to go full completionist mode, go through the game once and then come back and go through it all again when you have all of the gadgets unlocked. It just feels like it'd be much easier to do it that way rather than going back and forth. Most of these optional extras only really matter for like unlocking things like costumes, sword colors, unlocking the music in the game, and some like collector card things. Again, all optional and mostly just fun stuff for completionists, which I do think is worth going through just because I think the game is pretty fun. Although it is kind of hard to tell when you're going through these areas to do completionist stuff, where one area begins and another ends in terms of going full collector's mode on the menu. Though on the other side, I do kind of appreciate that a lot of the world design throughout the game accommodates for being able to traverse both ways through the level just to kind of help alleviate the backtracking and confusion of the map somewhat. Other than that, the world design is very good. I think the controls for the platforming are great. Being able to either double jump straight away, then dodge roll over a gap, or jump, dodge roll, then jump again is good. It gives a bit of freedom. I will say that the game feels very floaty, but overall the world design is very much accommodated for that. The last thing I have to talk about gameplay wise is the combat. The combat in Duskfade is initially kind of bare bones and a little bland. To start off, Zirian only gets like a basic combo with his sword and then the dodge roll. Although I must admit that there is a timing on the dodge roll that will slow down time if you get it right, and it looks and feels great to pull off. Over time throughout the game and using some of the currency you collect, you are able to unlock more and robust combos for Zirian, as well as gadgets like the ability to grapple hook to enemies during fights, and also adding like a counter attack on the time slow dodge that begin to make combat feel like less of a slog and more fun to interact with. Although it feels like some things like the grapple hook to enemies could have been implemented from the start to give the game a better baseline to work off of. And also there's Zirian's companion Cuckoo, who is also here. She attacks enemies sometimes. It'd be nice if she had more to do, or even had some abilities that you could use for her, because as a companion she doesn't do a whole lot, and it feels like there was a lot of potential there to integrate her into combat or even platforming, and that's just not utilized throughout the game. Also Zirian has a bunch of special abilities. These are kind of hit or miss. They have a meter that builds up over combat, and you can use special ability. The most useful one is the one where you go invulnerable for a certain amount of time and you can run around and then blow up everything around you, which is the most useful one and probably the one you'll use the most throughout the game. Other than that, gameplay wise, I think the game is pretty solid. There's definitely some room for improvement, but I feel like that would be something left for a sequel if this game ever gets one, which I kind of hope it does. Alright, so let's move on to the art style. So I think this game looks absolutely gorgeous. The art direction in this game is fantastic. The world design is incredibly unique, with all the clockwork design weaved throughout all of the different biomes and landscapes. I think the skyboxes and backgrounds often look amazing. There isn't a crazy amount of asset reuse throughout the game, which is really cool to see. And I also think the presentation of the menus looks really great. I love the stained glass look. It's very stylistic without sacrificing form, which is great. I do think maybe the lighting in the game might be a little bit too strong. There might be just like one too many effects on the screen, but overall I think the game looks phenomenal otherwise. As for the other things, the monster designs are okay. Most of them are just like purple blobs, but they do all look different enough from each other, so that's fine. The boss designs are pretty great. Also, the destruction physics on objects looks really good. Look, it's just an overall really good looking game. I think the art direction is absolutely killer. Moving on to music, I think the music in this game is okay. It matches the tone of the game pretty decently, but I found it to be not so memorable. There are some nice, slow kind of piano melodies in the hub areas that I didn't mind, and also a few of the boss tracks were very decent. But other than that, the music kind of faded into the background for me. It's kind of a normal adventure orchestral score. Often when I talk about music, I ask, does the game match the tone of the game or set the tone of the game? And I think with Duskfade, it matches the tone, which is okay. I do feel like the art style is the part of the game doing the heavy lifting in terms of tone. Moving on to performance, my specs are on the screen here. I ran the game at 1440p on the max graphics preset for pretty much the entire playtime. The game ran at a stable frame rate. Now this frame rate was heavily dependent on which area of the game I was in. The first biome was easily like 100 frames plus, but the lava area, which was the hardest performance wise in the game, would drop me to about 70-ish FPS. The frames would stay pretty consistent though. There weren't any harsh frame drops or anything. The game would just run consistent, but lower or higher depending on the biome. So if you set your FPS to a consistent 60, you probably won't notice it. Also, I didn't run into any crashes or game-breaking bugs throughout my playthrough. There were a couple of tiny bugs here and there. I got stuck inside of a platform once, but there is a menu button that resets to last checkpoint, so that cost me like 30 seconds at most. And there is one small bug that got me a few times where you can have a bit of deceleration of speed when jumping off of some surfaces in the game. Happened maybe a handful of times throughout the game. Not a huge problem because punishment for failing a jump is pretty minimal. Now, Duskfade is verified for Steam Deck, so I gave it a shot to see how it ran, and it did so pretty decently. And one of the things I was surprised to see in the settings was a dedicated graphics preset for Steam Deck, which I absolutely appreciate, not having to tinker around myself trying to get the game running well. And the game does indeed run well on Steam Deck on those settings, which I like to see. So the game is definitely playable on Steam Deck. That being said, I really like the look of the game, and I think the game is much better suited for the big screen, but the option to play on Steam Deck is here. In conclusion, Duskfade is a pretty good game. Playing it did make me feel a bit nostalgic for the golden years of adventure platformers. It was the same kind of feeling that I had when I played A Hat in Time, though I don't think Duskfade is as good as that game. Yeah, Duskfade has some problems, mostly with the uneven story, though I absolutely commend the game for trying to do something a bit deeper with its world building and the themes of grief. Even though it doesn't always land, there is an emotional center there that I think is pretty decent. But other than that, I pretty much liked everything that this game had to offer. So it took me about 12 hours to beat the game, which I would put around about the average time to beat. Though if you were wanting to go for like full completion and all collectibles, I'd imagine this game will take you well past 15 hours of game time. So Duskfade will be available as soon as this review goes up. It will be available for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series S and X, Switch 2 and PC via Steam. It will be priced at about $30 US or about $44 Australian depending on your platform, and will be on sale for a 20% discount on Steam for the first 2 weeks of launch, which I think the game is well worth the asking price, especially if you're into adventure platformers like I am and kind of want to relive like those old style of adventure platformers from like the kind of PS2 era, you know, like your Jak and Daxters and such. So right, that's all I have to say on Duskfade, so thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, then please leave it a like, and if you are new here, then please consider subscribing. As always, many thanks to my YouTube members for their continued support. Absolute legends. Alrighty, so that's it for today, and I'll see you all soon for something. I don't know yet. We'll see. Bye.